I'm really happy to be the guy that talks about numbers after such entertaining presentations for the last half hour. No, seriously, I'm always inspired to be here. It's such an amazing group and so many great speakers today. And I was joking with Rob a little bit before I came up, Rob Hilton with HF&H. We have the job of really looking at the internal data nerd geek stuff on the inside of rates. And the rates really are, they're the intersection of the policies, the programs, the high diversion push, the finance, the operations, the public outreach, the contracting. It really is the intersection between all of these things. But it's not the most exciting topic to most people. Who's excited about rate setting? Okay, good. Thank you. I knew we'd be in good hands. So you know what? I wish I could say that my low-tech approach to this was actually intentional. It's a balance of how much can we actually get done in one day, and can I coach my kids' baseball team on the weekends? So the team got the coaching. You guys get me just talking without a PowerPoint. So, I'm here to give you a bit of a snapshot of some of the recent trends that we're seeing in rate setting, an interplay of rate setting and what's happening with diversion programs out there within our mostly Bay Area-wide worldview, but also California-wide. Here's the thing. You've heard folks talk about over the last several years the fact that we're in a bit of a death spiral, and I think, Rob, I don't know if you coined the term, but it's one that's really stuck with folks overall. But we've had a bit of a death spiral on the rates. We're pushing for programmatic changes and is successful at programmatic changes that reduce how much people subscribe to their landfill container at the curb or in their business, how many landfills we're actually sending to, or how many tons we're actually sending to landfill. The problem we see, and this shouldn't be news to most of you, is that we've been building our revenue basis on those programmatic elements, the landfill tons, the landfill carts. You have bundled service rates based upon landfill size. Thank you, Laura. We've been charging our rates based on those, but also being successful, and importantly so, in reducing how much of that we're doing. So we have a problem, and folks are aware with this, where we're reducing our revenues, but the expenses related to these systems are largely staying the same. Just because we're moving tons out of landfill and into composting or into recycling doesn't really mean that we have these cost savings that are built in. And part of the problem that we've encountered with the rates that we've been setting over the years is we're creating the public impression from the ratepayers and from the policymakers that recycling's free or it's cheaper. The bottom line is sending a truck to collect your garbage versus your organics versus your recycling, that's the same fixed cost most of the time. The processing for these materials, landfills, yes, they can be expensive, but we're seeing such fluctuations within the recycling market and so much infrastructure put into making sure that we can have maximum recovery from our recyclable stream that's still an expensive process. Maybe, some of the time or most of the time it's going to be, for some communities, a cheaper option than landfilling, but some of the time it's going to be a little bit closer overall. And don't get me started on organic waste. We know that there's a lot of new changes in policies and new changes in regulations and oversight to those that are also making that a more costly endeavor. Still important, but more costly overall. And so what I'm looking to do is to give you a bit of a snapshot of what are we seeing right now in terms of trends towards rate setting that are looking to make incremental adjustments to rates to address this concern. How do we deal with the fact that we're getting the revenues on a shrinking customer base while we still have costs that are overall the same, if not more expensive? We're seeing programs that are being driven in large local cities here in the Bay Area where you've got good programmatic changes that are going to be able to push tons away from landfill and into more recycling and into more composting. It's actually driving the cost of the system up because of the routing changes and the policy changes and the technology changes for addressing these things. So it's not cheaper. It's not going to be cheaper, and that's okay. We got to find ways of addressing our rate structures that get there. Okay, so looking to my notes, so we've got a conundrum. We've set rates that were intended to provide an economic focus on reducing the amount that people put into their landfill containers by giving them a discount on the stuff they put into their blue card or green card, to use the generic terms, their organics and their recycling containers. So we want to preserve incentives. We want to give people the right signals to do the right thing with these things, but we also have an obligation and a duty to make sure that we're financing that complete system that is making all of this run, and we have a duty to make sure that we're sending the right message overall. Sorry, getting myself a little tied up. Long day. Look. So we've got a conundrum. The point of what I want to talk about is what do we do about this problem now? What are we seeing being done? You've heard Rob and you've heard others talk about this over the course of the years, and we've made some iterative adjustments to that. But ultimately, what we're seeing is that there's a strong push for a variety of reasons to start to move rates towards the cost of providing those services, so that you have rates that adequately address the cost of providing the garbage, recycling, and organic services out there. And it's not something that I would recommend flipping the switch on overnight. You really do need an iterative approach overall to get there. Because if you flip it on overnight, there's going to be some people with some pretty concerned phone calls to their policymakers. Other things to consider with this is you've gotten the migration to the downward service. You need to have systems that are going to be able to adapt to downward migration, adapt to changes in the amount of material we're putting in the race stream. I'm trying to time myself as well, Laura, but I'm just going to rely on yours because it's actually, thank you so much. Good. Okay, so what do we do about this? We want to set rates to cost of service. We also want to preserve incentives to divert. I'm going to tackle the incentives piece first, because what we've seen in the last few years as a state is providing lots of other ways of providing incentives other than just money. One point I would make is moving towards a cost of service rate model can be done in an iterative fashion. You don't have to go full bore from not charging anything from recycling and organics to charging the full cost of those services. You can take an iterative step-by-step approach, which starts to create this conversation piece with your policymakers and your ratepayers. These parts of your service do cost some money. You're going to start to pay some portion of that within your rate base, and it's important that you understand that that's the way this is moving. Second, we should recognize, and I need to credit, where's Andrew Sloan with Cascadia? Andrew, stand up, shout. All right, so Andrew's been talking for some time about, hey, it can be pretty small. Dollar differences in your rates can still send an economic signal to ratepayers. You don't have to have these linear rate structures where for every gallon of trash that you have that much of a proportionate impact. You can have a pretty flat rate base. You can have smaller dollar changes still sending the right economic signals to folks overall. Third, regulation helps. AB 341, AB 1826, mandatory collection ordinances, mandatory participation ordinances. These are other types of incentives that people have at their disposal. They're tools that you have in your toolbox. Pardon? So yeah, but it's still an incentive. It's not a voluntary, I'm going to save money to do this incentive, but it is an incentive to do the right thing within this overall structure that we're talking about. And I think another one is having that motivational aspect. Communities with zero waste plans, zero waste goals, high diversion plans, whatever you're going to call it, that provides a community interest towards a drive, towards something that we're all working to do together, and that can become an incentive. So price isn't the only incentive that ratepayers respond to. There are other ways of getting them there. So for those that might be concerned that moving towards a cost of service rate model within their community is eliminating the rate signal, and that means that everybody's going to start putting everything in the trash, I say that's not true. It may be true in some cases, and I wouldn't do it all at once, but that's not the main reason to keep putting that into your rate system. And ultimately, what we see is because of the changes within the system, you have to start going there, and you need to start doing it now. Okay, so moving this into a close, what I wanted to talk about, and I've got 1 minute and 45 seconds, there are 3 main projects going on in the Bay Area right now that aren't fully done, so I don't have results to share, and I don't have tables and things to put on a slide, but there are a few ways that communities regionally are approaching this. So San Francisco right now, with Recology, is moving towards a rate structure that has a fixed cost element within the rate base. So no matter what your garbage container size or your recycling size, your organic size, there's a per unit or per household charge, just a part of the rate. It covers the fixed costs related to the cost of providing operations, and it provides some stability within it. And then for the recycling, organics, and trash portion, there's a volumetric base, and it's about a 2-to-1 ratio. Recycling and organics are about half, volumetrically speaking, in terms of the rate model for what the trash component is. So it provides for a stable rate base. It provides the due compensation to the hauler and the processors to make sure that they're keeping the system whole, while still providing some economic incentives to divert. Okay, so that's a current, not yet finalized, but current process. In Santa Rosa and Windsor right now, up in Sonoma County, R3 is working with those communities on procurements of new solid waste contracts. And within that, I'm going to go 1 minute over, I'm sorry. Within those, we're requesting rates from the proposers that says, give us a fixed cost of providing the collection services for all 3 streams for each subscriber, and then give us the volumetric basis for each of those 3 streams based upon the cost that you anticipate, so that you've got these variable cost elements based on volume, and you've got a fixed cost component. And they responded that way. I can't share the results, but they did respond that way, and it's giving us and the policymakers that we're advising some opportunities to make some different decisions. And then we're also working, and I'm working with Ruth Abbey on this in Menlo Park, is working on moving from a current kind of funky upside down rate structure to one that's more based on a cost of service model basis. But again, doing that with a plan, doing that with a model, and making sure that there is actually a methodology in place to get there. So what do these all have in common? They're all iterative. You can move towards cost of service rates iteratively. You need a methodology for being able to address the fact that you've got fixed costs in these systems that really aren't going to change regardless of what people are doing with the waste. Now, if everybody reduces waste, yes, that fixed cost is going to come down. But assuming the same overall generation, the fixed costs are going to be the same whether it's in the garbage or in the recycling or the composting. That is my 10 minutes. Okay. These models they still preserve some monetary incentives to divert, but they're also coming along with other incentives within their structure, policy structure, programmatic structure throughout the community. And the big outcome in this, and this is the hard part to digest, and it's what I want to encourage all of you in the public sector with ratepayers and with policymakers to start talking about, is in all of these, folks who currently pay low waste generation rates based on their garbage containers only going to see their rates go up. It's just a part of the math behind what's happening with the rates right now. And as we start to introduce other cost elements into the system, those low waste generators, and I'm one of them in the 20-gallon container, I'm going to start to see it go up because I'll be paying more into the share of the other components of the system that really aren't included in the rate base now. Okay. Yeah, it's challenging, and we're also not, a pure. So the question is, how do you market that with the policymakers and the body politic that is the recipient of changes in rates like this? So I would say, one, it's a group effort. It's not just us doing this. It's a part of working with the city management and also with the folks that are more adept at the public perception piece of this. But I think the biggest overall thing I would say is start the conversation, start the education of the policymakers and the staff and of the community. Even if you're not making a rate change now, start to talk to them about that. Put out the reports of the information saying, hey, here's what's going on with the marketplace. Recycling and organics do cost money to be able to provide those services.
Mm-hmm. Please, and then Steve.
So what about pay-as-you-throw program? Do you find that the costs don't change even if your pay-as-you-throw, say your basic fee is $15, the next year if you've got one size card it's 17, but yours is still 15, and so on and so forth. So your costs for the 17 or the 15 are the same.
So yes, I mean, ultimately the cost of collecting those containers in the various sizes and even the various commodities, the collection operational piece of that, assuming the same net overall volume or tonnage that you're collecting regardless, it's roughly the same. It just doesn't change all of that much. And so when you're talking, my point here is that a pay-as-you-throw model has served us very well. It's gotten us to the point where we're able to have some different conversations about what's happening with our rates and with our programs, but it can't continue, especially if we continue to drive down the landfill piece more and more and more, and it only use that as the basis of financing. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question? Okay, Steve?
I'm curious on the messaging with some of these communities. They're moving more in this direction of charging for all 3 streams. Now, on one hand, there's these are environmental amenities. You got to pay for those, and on the other, it's
Why am I paying for this thing that used to be free?
Mm-hmm. Because we don't like that socially. What messaging is being employed?
And again, the 3 projects I referenced are fairly new, and we're not into the messaging piece yet. But what we're preparing for is a couple of different things. One, we can continue to charge in the same way if there really is that gut reaction to, I don't want to see line items on my bill showing recycling and organics collection and processing charges. But we can still calculate those as a part of the kind of backside process and make those publicly known and aware to the policymakers and the public, even if it's still just one lump sum charge on their bill. That's one way of being able to address it. In other communities, it really is about, is that community ready for this message? I think would be the first question. If they're ready for it, then I think it's a good opportunity to be able to really lay it out there. San Francisco, is moving very strongly in that direction. Other communities, Sonoma County, I think it's going to be a lump charge because they're moving from not a system that's really ready for that yet. Hopefully that helps.
Sadly, that's our last question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well done, sir.